Hi, welcome to the tutorial for Physics Handle Interact component. This tutorial is gonna consist of two parts. First part, I'm just gonna show you how you can set this Physics Handle component, and then I'm gonna show you how you can customize it and how basically the component works under the HUD. So first thing that we're gonna do is just remove these two components. So now we basically have a typical, and we also need to remove this. And now we basically have a typical first-person character that Unreal offers, so we cannot grab anything, and I'm gonna show you how you can set this up. First thing is, one thing that is the requirement for this component to work is that you just need any camera in your character. So this is something that I would expect any character to have, which is a camera the player operates. The camera will be automatically found by the component. So if I click add now and type handle, we have these two components that need to work. So physics handle component is Unreal's component that gives you some options to manipulate objects, but it is not really set up for you, just gives you some options. And physics handle interact component is the component that I created, which basically gives you all of the inputs and controls that manipulate this physics handle component, so you don't have to basically create and do all of that from scratch. So we need basically both of them. So if I create this guy and also add physics handle, when I add two of them, this is basically enough for this setup in here. Now one thing that we just need to do is pull this physics handle track component, and we just need to activate it somewhere. So I'm going to activate it on begin play, and we have this activate grab component, and this is basically what we need to do. So let's go in the level, click play. If I left click on this object, we grabbed it, and I have set up the mouse rotations, and we can see by default it is rotating a bit slow even if I'm moving my mouse a lot. So let's modify that a bit. If I go to my physics handle interact, we can see rotation speed set to 1. Let's set it to 5. Now I can click play, and when I rotate it, now it rotates way faster. So that's basically it. The setup of the component is really easy because we have all of the setup and getting the right components in here, so we don't have to set anything up in here. All of the options in here is basically how the component actually works, and nothing related to getting the references or setting stuff up to make the component work. That is kind of it for the first part of the tutorial. Setup is pretty easy. One thing to mention is that we also have the activate component, and let's connect it in here. So we're just going to activate it and deactivate it right away. And now if I click, we can see our component is not working. So at any point you can basically disable the grab component. Okay, now that we have this working, let's delete deactivate, and that will conclude the first part of the tutorial. The second part is going to be a bit more technical, and we're going to talk about the component itself and how it works, so you can kind of know how to customize it and work with it under the HUD, because usually for projects you need to customize it in some way to make it work exactly how you want for your project. And I try to make this component kind of easy to modify, so you don't have to change the component too much and you can add your own functionality. So we're going to cover that. So first thing that we have is this activate and deactivate component. So I segmented everything in sections, so I'm going to cover all of them so you generally know what's happening. So first, in the activate component, we just check if the physics handle component exists. So this is necessary for my component to work, so we basically just check for that. Then we get multiple references and set a mapping context. So this basically means we set up our physics handle core input mapping context. I'm basically using it for this component. So if you go to input, we have 3 physics handles. One is for keyboard, one is for mouse, and one is called core, which is basically also for mouse. And this is just to actually grab, release, and zoom or move the object closer and farther from the camera. So these are general, even if you're using keyboard to rotate and manipulate the object, or you're using the mouse, you're still gonna have this. So I made them into a separate input mapping context. So this is always activates in the beginning, and then you have separate for keyboard. So you have Q and E, R and T, and F and G. You can of course change it in here if you want. If you want different key bindings, you can change it in here, or you can create a new mapping context, and I'm gonna show you also how you can add it in here. Okay, so that is it for activate the component. Also, we have these get references, which is basically we get the player controller and we get the camera reference. So player controller is also necessary. So this component won't work for AI, which is not something that I think I'm going to support with this component. This is specifically for the player. And if you want to extend the references, it would be a good idea to do in this function since it's basically made for that. And for the activate component, we have the release. So there is a bunch of stuff in here. There is some stuff for the multiplayer. There is the actual release component. So this function is called on the physics handle. There is also to remove mapping context. This is important. So for us to remove the keyboard mapping context and also mouse mapping context, because we don't want these two to be active if we are disabling this component. There is also a look input, so if we were holding left or right click when we deactivated it, we just want to give back control to the player for the mouse. Disable a tick because we are using tick to update the location, and just clear the handle if we were updating the server. And the last thing for the activate grab component is this remove mapping context, and this is just to remove the core input also. So this is left mouse, right mouse. We don't want any of that functionality anymore since we're deactivating it. Then we have our core inputs. So this is our left mouse button, right mouse button, and scroll. And the left mouse button is for grabbing objects. So first we check if things are valid. So if we do have grabbed object already, then we want to manipulate it. But if we do not have it, we want to actually try to and see if we have anything to grab. And in here, you basically check if the component is already grabbed or if it's hit. So this is where we check if component is grabbed. I'm using component tags to let the player know. So this is good for multiplayer basically. Is to let the player know if any other players are currently grabbing this component, so if they can grab it or not. And if we pass this check, we save the hit results so we can check the filters. And in filters, we have all of the filters from the list in here. And you can easily expand this if you need any new filters. And for some optimization, if let's say you are only going to use one of these, so let's say physics simulated, you can basically just do this and delete this switch because you don't care about any other options. So I decided to use enums because of this reason, so you can easily optimize if you want and remove options, or you can expand if you want and add new options. Now each of these has our hit variable. We check if it's simulating physics just in case, because even if you detect the object that maybe has an interface or is a specific class, it could not be simulating physics. And for the physics handle component to work, it needs a simulate physics active. And then if it's true, we just go to grab component, and this is true for every filter. So if you go back, actor has the same thing. We just check for the actors and then go grab component. And in here we have our hit result. We make a check. This check is global just for each filter, just to make sure if it's simulated physics, because some of them are using actor tags or interfaces. Then we have the grab component. So we basically set up our physics handle component to grab something. Enable tick so we can update location, rotation, stuff like that. We have our grab distance, and we set up stuff for the server. And activate update server so we can let the server know, and we use our tick rate that we set up in here. Okay, so that's grab, and in here we have a manipulation tab. So if it's a mouse, we just need to set which axis we are manipulating if we are holding left click, and to ignore look input, so we basically stop camera from rotating, so you can basically just rotate the object, and we add the mouse mapping context. And when we release the left mouse, we just set everything back, so we don't have anything of that working for manipulation axis. Right mouse, we have manipulation type. So if we go to keyboard, we have mouse twice rotation. That is something needed with how I calculate the rotation when you're rotating the object. And for the mouse, we check if we have a grabbed component, and if we don't have, we don't do anything. And if we do, we start manipulating the object. And when we release, depending on how long we kept the right mouse, if we just clicked it, then that means we're going to release the object. But if we did not click it, then we want to manipulate the object. So that's kind of the difference here. Then for the scroll, we have to update grab distance, and then we use the value and our speed multiplier to know how fast we can change the distance of the object to the camera. And then we have a server. I'm not going to go too much into this, but basically we update the server for certain intervals. And we also need to update some stuff for the tags, so all of the other players know that tags are changing. And this is set up for grabbing, and then we have our update. So this is basically where we update the location rotation. And we also for the server have the release, so what happens when we release, and then we also remove the tags so other people can grab the object. And then for the tick, we have a few things in here. First, we have bounce check. So depending if we do have it enabled or disabled, we need to do some additional checks. So if we have a bounce check enabled, we basically go in here. We check if there is anything in front of the object. If it is, we adjust its distance. Then we have these mouse inputs where we have Y, Z, X, and then Z rotation. So there is a special thing here. Instead of calling the actual Z rotation function, we set this mouse Y rotation. And the reason for this is just how, since this is all running at the same time, the inputs, sometimes they override each other. So I had to have it separately set. And then if you go to Y target rotation, we can see here mouse Y rotation, and I here left a note so it is more easily understandable what's happening there. For the keyboards, we have X, Y, and Z rotation, and basically the rotation speed, this is multiplied for everyone so we get the right speed. And that's basically it for the setup. I also left a comment, so if you zoom out, you should have a clear view of where everything is. And the most easily extendable stuff what you have in the enums. So if you have additional rotation types, if you want to change the manipulation type, maybe add something in here, that is easily extendable. And I also use input mapping context, so you can easily create your own to extend this component. So hopefully that made sense. If you have any questions or requests, you can leave a comment and I'll see if I can add it to the component.